Hello, this is your second lecture for this week's Intro to Humanities. First off, I want to say I tried something different. Your first PowerPoint or presentation was done on traditional PowerPoint. Your second presentation was done on Prezi. The reason I chose Prezi was because I put a lot of video, as you can see, into the presentation. However, I don't know which one you guys prefer. So I'm going to be putting up a discussion board with no grade on there, so you don't have to post. But what I'd like to know is, do you have a preference between PowerPoint and Prezi? Were you able to access the material well? Did you feel they helped you? Pretty much my PowerPoints are meant to highlight the important parts of the book. So you should be reading them along with your book. And as you can see, I copied a lot of the material out of the book and put on there or summarized some of it. And then I added things like pictures and videos. So to kind of give you a little bit of a multimedia experience. I will be doing more of that as we go along, incorporating more material of that nature in. Now, this second chapter of your book focuses on the ancient cultures. And it divides it up into a few categories. We have ancient Egypt, which of course is why I was inspired to start with Steve Martin's infamous King Tut. Now, for some of you, I realize you've never heard that, but I couldn't resist. It's iconic, and it really kind of brings the pop culture format of King Tut to highlight that. And the fact that Tut really, though he wasn't the most famous or the most important of the Egyptian pharaohs, he certainly had one of the most influential issues towards pop culture. From there, you looked at the Mesopotamian, the Sumerians. I incorporated some material about the cuneiforms, the Sumerian form of writing. It's the oldest writing known. I also incorporated another video about their particular type of fort, ziggurat. And then you went on to the Indian, what becomes India, the Indus, which really, again, focused a lot on art and really began looking at religion, and in particular was the introduction of the Hindu gods. And then you went on to ancient China, which has pretty much been one of the most consistent histories. We have an ability to trace back Chinese history with more authority than most other ancient cultures. And to a certain extent, some of it has stayed the same, particularly the language and the writing. We are still using the same Chinese writing that was used 4,000 years ago. And then we had the ancient Americas. I put in a video about the Mayan culture, which is one of the more interesting cultures in America. So, what's the summary of this material? Well, first off, I want you to realize that a couple of things go in common. These ancient cultures become important once they start having a written form where they're able to record their histories, record their religions, record their literature. And really, that's one of the main focuses. It is the written language that brought them to a sense of authority and established their place in history. The other thing is, when you have this written language start, you begin to have art, literature, and religion. And it is the mythos that tends to bind these cultures, and it helps them build. And when you look at some of these cultures, one of the things you find interesting is that a lot of that mythos overlaps. A lot of myths overlap. So, for example, there's a great mythology philosopher whose name is Joseph Campbell. he wrote the foremost piece on mythos, which is called Hero with a Thousand Faces. And in that he proposes a theory that the heroic figure in most myths and legends is basically the same. That he runs through the same pattern in all of these folk, all of these religions, all of these cultures. And we see this overlap. For example, many of the cultures have some sort of Christ figure that takes it upon himself, sacrifices himself for the whole of the civilization. They often have creation myths. They often have flood myths. They often have some sort of afterlife, a heaven and a hell. So you see that kind of forming of overlapping mythologies. For our part, you are going to be looking at these 2 PowerPoints. I have a journal up for you. I'm going to have 2 discussions for this week, and then a quiz, which will cover Chapter 1, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and Chapter 2. And I chose the Epic of Gilgamesh because it's one of the earliest written myths of a hero. And in this culture, I don't know if you can see behind me, I have a picture of Hellboy, but I teach a class on comic books at Stockton University. And comics is modern mythology. And even those often look back on our ancient myths and legends and pull characters from them, such as Thor, the Amazonian Wonder Woman, and so on. So that hero figure that we see today in characters like Captain America and Batman started with the Epic of Gilgamesh. He was the first written hero. And it's interesting, a lot of his mythos, how modern some of it is. For example, though you don't read all the tablets for this class, in there, Gilgamesh falls in love with a man and sacrifices himself to save his love. So we have this kind of abnormal relationship in this ancient Sumerian culture. So that is also an interesting element to this. But it is that sacrifice of the hero that becomes the stable that runs throughout the hero myths. That the hero is willing to give up his life for those he loves. Alright, so we're going to finish up this video because if they get too long, YouTube gets mad. But hopefully you guys have any questions, please post it. You will have, as I said, a introduction discussion. There's going to be a discussion for each of the chapters, and then there's going to be an open, non-graded discussion where I'm just looking for some feedback on how I'm putting this course together. Alright, and don't forget to take a quiz. All the material, the discussions, the journal, and the quiz are due by Monday, well, midnight Sunday. Let me see what date that is. Midnight Sunday, July 2nd. Alright, so all your materials due by midnight, July 2nd. And the same will be for the following week. You'll be given similar material to do, and it will be due by midnight the Sunday, by the next Sunday. Alright? Have fun.